While it might not be the most glamorous part of a car to get stuck into, you can't really consider your pride and joy to be properly clean until its door shuts have been dialed in. So keep it locked, no pun intended, to see me thoroughly strip back, enhance and protect my 27-year-old examples that I doubt have ever been treated to anything other than a damp chamois swipe. So in spite of being old, these retro shuts, thankfully from my perspective at least, weren't caked in compacted greenery or stubborn traffic film as a lot of others often are, but were still sporting enough Sahara sand, stale silicone grease and rusty screw heads to warrant a spruce up with a few fresh bottles of plonk, which you should always plan to do at least the once, as despite potentially being a bit of a messy faff, there's something about presentable shuts, especially on older or less valuable cars, that help to elevate the overall look and feel of them from that of their unkept contemporaries. Now, while the initial plan was to include a bit of disassembly, surface rust removal and cavity wax protection in addition to the deep cleaning, the combination of uninvited copper chopper and not really having enough hours in the day to let things cure in between coats meant I decided to jack that in for the most part here and just focus on the cleaning instead, but I did at least swap the rusting steel screws out for some more resistant ones, and I will be revisiting the sills off camera to get them as externally rust free and internally protected as I realistically can, as they're still pretty solid, so would be a shame to let the surface stuff take hold. Although the front door shuts were going to be the main focus here, thought I'd ease myself into the awkward undertaking with the slightly more accessible boot shut, so swished it out from top to bottom with the open end of the quick release stubby gun with the washer turned off to gently remove any loose dirt before I made contact. And I generally recommend treating door shuts to a dedicated clean like this prior to tackling the rest of the car, to avoid potentially contaminating freshly cleaned exterior and interior surfaces with not so fresh dirt and chemical infused splatter. Speaking of chemical infusion, I'd pre-diluted some Gtechniq multi-purpose cleaner 50/50 with water for use on the shuts, as neat seemed a little excessive and any more diluted potentially a bit weak for a targeted strip job. But either way, once it had been directly applied, was for the most part thoroughly worked in with a super soft brush, as having been treated to a fair few post-wash wipe downs since coming into my custody, there wasn't really any deeply ingrained dirt that needed teasing out with anything stiffer. But I did also work a slim shampoo primed microfibre wash mitt over as well, just to try and neutralise the potent froth and further prepare the shuts, before treating them to another rinse in non-powered fashion, making sure to remove any sudsy residue from surrounding panels, as although I would be going on to wash the car, I wouldn't be doing so anytime soon. The front of the door shuts were then rinsed out, this time with the washer on, albeit at reduced pressure as I didn't want to hit the aging nooks, crannies and connections at full whack. But at the same time, this area did need a good dousing to both remove the loose dirt that had been accumulating for months if not years, as well as help the subsequently applied cleaner to be more effectively carried to the somewhat inaccessible components. Which I did quite liberally here, as you don't want to commit to cleaning awkward and potentially temperamental parts like these only for them to look no better when you're done. So in these instances I'd say it's best to slightly over apply rather than under apply. Once thoroughly spritzed, the all-purpose cleaner was worked into and over the front door shut recesses, hinges and whatever else lurked within them, with an easy detailed brush which, provided it's clean, is perfect for these kinds of parts, as despite its long synthetic bristles can be squeezed into most nooks and crannies, as well as with a few soft detailed brushes which were mostly used to dislodge the stale silicone grease. Following up with a shampoo primed microfibre Mitt wash for good measure, which isn't essential but generally makes sense to me, before going on to rinse that lot off so I could move on to the next bit, as well off camera you'd aim to get each shut done in one fell swoop. Faffing with one for the sake of a YouTube video can often double the amount of time things normally take, so it made more sense for me to work in sections here. The rest of the black coloured door shuts were then treated in a similar vein, which with it being a warm day wasn't ideal, but this was now the third attempt at getting this filmed after having been repeatedly rained off, so had no other choice but to go with the sunny spring flow. And although it's a bit of an awkward one to film, especially with a camera that often refuses to properly focus and or expose itself, just did what I could to give you a decent enough idea of what went down without blocking the line of sight too much, which is easier said than done. Trying to remain conscious of the fact that while I didn't want to incessantly be scrubbing or unnecessarily cross-contaminating surrounding surfaces, this was also the kind of clean that I likely wouldn't be carrying out again anytime soon, so didn't want to be half-arsing it either. All the while keeping my fingers crossed that a subsequent contact wash of the car would take care of any cack-handed chemical splatter once there was no more call for it on the shuts. Although this video wasn't really about the exterior cleaning process, you do ideally want to set the time aside for at least a routine maintenance wash to ensure the outer panels don't let the freshly cleaned shuts down, which is why I spent an hour or so here treating the coupe to its first clean in 3 weeks, which included a bit of a targeted rinse through its panel gaps to blast the shuts out at full pressure one last time without risking wetting the interior, which is a little hack you can employ when washing if you don't fancy wetting your shuts down with the doors open. But with these items essentially only being halfway there, had to mostly finish this up off camera so I could then crack on with the rest on camera. So once the outside of the car had been dried off, I treated the freshly cleaned shuts to a thorough toweling with a general purpose item or two, as while I had planned to treat them to Summer Turtle Wax's ceramic wet wax to enhance and superficially protect them in all-encompassing fashion, decided the more open areas of the shuts at least would likely benefit from a polish instead. And while I did treat the boot one to a few healthy spritzes of the super slick feeling wet wax prior to drying them off, decided rightly or wrongly to douse the sills, lower rubber seals and internal area of the front door shuts with some Carpro PERL dressing, as water-based products like these always seem to work well on engine bays, which in my mind aren't too far removed from these parts, before leaving it all to soak and disperse while I put myself and the micro polisher on impromptu recharge for half an hour. So while I'm not necessarily advocating you machine polish your car's shuts, there's no denying that doing so, especially on previously neglected ones like these, will serve to considerably lift their overall look. Although I wasn't aiming to fully correct and perfect, as that would require disassembly and far more time than I could realistically spare here, did want to ensure I treated their more open and accessible areas to a targeted single stage polish with some one and done compound and my old MP4 tool, which has long been discontinued but is still pretty much identical to any of the other cheap Chinese derived machines that will likely pop up with a quick Google search for cordless micro polisher or similar. While the front door shuts were awkwardly dealt with in dual action fashion, which did mean a bit of frustrating stalling over the uneven contoured surfaces, the rear boot shut, including the top part of the bumper, were seen to an extended rotary style, as there wasn't much space for the jiggle of a dual action head here, and despite being a bit spare at the moment, still served to enhance the previously flat surfaces to an acceptable extent. But even if it didn't, doubt you'll see anyone else attempting any better on a car of equivalent age and value for the sake of a few thousand views on YouTube. And if you're watching this thinking, sod that, or my shuts don't need machine polishing, then I'd suggest simply substituting this conclusory stage for the targeted application of a spray protectant instead, which will help keep your more modern, well-kept shuts looking and feeling slick in between routine maintenance cleans. So although things didn't go exactly to plan here, aside from still needing to touch up the rusty spots under the sill trim with some gloopy gloss black, could semi-successfully tick another job off the long list of cleaning tasks to perform with the car. And while this one will likely go unnoticed by most, as I said at the start of the video, there's just something satisfying about having a car with presentable shuts, so would always recommend treating yours to a deep clean at least the once. And if you do, don't forget to lubricate its hinges, preferably with something like this Silicone WD40 that won't leave loads of unsightly dry residue behind before you call it a day.